Hello, today I'm going to share with you how to make the center strip 16-inch envelope style pillow cover. So a few things that you're going to need to do is first you're going to need to find my pattern, and you can find that either at the Fabric Fun with Cricut Design Space group, or you can find it in the Cricut community by searching my name or the name of the project. So that's the Center Stripe 16-inch envelope style pillow, once again. And I will also be sharing it when I post this video on Cricut Design Space in the February home decor and organizing craft day weekend. So a few things that you're going to need. First is you're going to need material to cut out the pillow cover in, and that requires a half a yard for the outer two stripes, both on the back and the front, so that's a half yard total. And for the center stripe, you're going to need about 1/3 of a yard. And you're also going to need coordinating thread and a 16-inch pillow form. Now the pillow forms look like this, and you can find them at pretty much any craft store, any fabric store, online. Say this particular one here actually has a removable cover on it with a zipper, so this is great so that if this gets soiled, you can just remove that cover. And another thing I'd like to share is the reason I like to do the envelope style pillow covers. The reason is that they're very easy to make, no zippers required. They are strictly sewing straight lines. And also that I can have a variety of styles available, those that match the holiday, everyday type of pillows, whatever I want. And all I have to store is the pillow covers. I don't actually have to store a whole pillow because you take the pillow form out and you put it into the new one. So that's just why I like them so much. Now, a few things for sewing that you're going to need is obviously a sewing machine. Like I said, coordinating thread. I like to use scissors. You can also use snips to cut your threads. I always like to keep my little seam ripper by the side. And in this one, you're also going to need a ruler or a seam gauge. That's what this is. And a point turner. This is what it looks like. This one I just picked up at Joann's. I say there's a lot of different ones. And this works great for poking out your corners on any projects that you sew. You can also use the end of a ruler, the end of a pencil, even if it's not too small, the corner that you're trying to poke out. People use chopsticks. It has to be dull though. You don't want to use like your scissor point here, because your scissor point, this is sharp and this will poke through your fabrics. So be careful that you don't use something sharp if you don't have a point turner like this. All right, so I think we're ready to begin. So I have already cut out my pieces. If you need help with that, I made a video that I shared on how to cut out fabric, both with the Cricut Maker and on Explorer Air Machine. There's 2 different videos to show that. And this one pattern here, I used the water washable Cricut pen to mark my seam allowances. Now it showed up really nice on my center stripe material. That's what this is. And then on my side pieces, unfortunately, they are the same or a very similar color to the water washable pen. So these lines are very, very faint, but they are actually on there. Okay, so what you do, the first thing is you take one of your side pieces and you take a center stripe piece. Doesn't matter which one you use. I'm doing a back piece here to demonstrate how to put this together. So now you are going to line up one of the sides all the way down. You can use pins. Oh, I forgot to mention, you need pins or you need clips for this project too. These are clips if you're not familiar with them. A lot of people like to use these. I use them when I'm sewing vinyl or I am sewing quilt projects together. Okay, so now I have this with a mixture of pin and clips, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go to my machine, set my stitch length at about a 10. On my machine, it runs from 20 stitches per inch all the way down to a very loose 6 to 5 inch per stitch. So about midway is the 10, 12, and that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to start and put my presser foot down in my material. You don't start like this off the material. You'll run sometimes into problems with your machine that the stitches will all jam up. So I always like to start down a little ways on my material. Remove the first pin because you don't want to sew over pins or clips because they can break your needle and a piece can go flying up and actually hit you in the eye. So be careful. I recommend that you get in the habit of removing those and not just sewing right over them. So I am going to start with the end of my, this is a zigzag foot. On my machine, the distance between the needle and either side is 1/4 of an inch. These are 1/4 of an inch seam allowances that are drawn on here. So I don't even have to draw a seam allowance on my projects if I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. So otherwise, start so that your needle comes down pretty much into the center of your line that's drawn. Stitch forward, stitch back, come forward again. Now this is called locking your seam, your stitches in. So now I'm going to sew down the rest of the way. There is no award you get for sewing fast or slow, strictly up to you how comfortable you are. Just sewing a straight line. If you've been making masks, then this should be no problem. Come all the way down to the edge, stop, put your machine in reverse, stitch back, and then come forward and stitch off your machine. Stop with your needle up. That'll keep your threads from twisting and doing odd things. Trim off your threads at both ends, back to the fabric. I say if you want your projects to look professional, always trim all your threads back as soon as you're done sewing a seam. That way you don't have little loose tags out and about. So now I am going to pin this next side, just matching one of the long sides up like that, putting a few pins in to hold it. And now I'm just going to do the same thing down this side. So this is how you put one of the pieces together. Now you will do the same thing for the front, using the 3 pieces that are cut the longest length. Just going to be a longer seam on the side, the other side of the back to form the envelope part is going to be exactly as the one that we're showing here. So again, just sew all the way down, locking in your seams, both ends. Stop with the needle up, trim these threads back. Okay, so the next part is to take this over to an iron. You can use your Easy Press if you have that. It's actually a fabulous iron. The mini Easy Press is great. I love to keep that actually right by my sewing machine so that I can just flip in my seat to a little table. It's all ready to go. And I am going to iron these seams, or just use a regular iron, which I'm actually going to do in this project. So flatten your seam from the center stripe toward your sides, because we're going to do a top stitch on this to hold this seam down. So let me go press that and I'll be right back. All right, so I ironed my seams so that they don't really want to stay. This is not the best fabric for putting a lot of heat on. You have to use a very mild temperature setting, otherwise it melts the fabric. So I did iron this so that these seams will fold and be headed towards the two side seams. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, and on the right side, I am going to stitch less than 1/4 of an inch all the way down this side here. And that will catch this seam to hold it over from the back. And I do this because, again, ironing and finishing off your seams in some way give your projects a much more professional look. So now I have increased my stitch length to the longest that I can for a top stitch. Just looks more attractive when you use a longer stitch. So again, just gonna sew down this side, locking it in at both edges. Don't need any pins or anything to hold this. And then I'm gonna lock this off, trim my seams down, and do the other side, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I stitched down both sides. So you can see now that if you turn it over, you've got 2 stitches that show on the back side. And the one we just did is the one closest to the raw edge, and it will help hold this flat. And this again will give your project a much more professional look on the outside edge. Now I used a print fabric that has a direction to it, or a nap. So I have to make sure that my 2 sides on my back line up, that they're both headed in the same direction. If you do it opposite, once again, it just doesn't look quite professional. So this is laid down now so that both sides, you can see the words are matching. So we're going to take, which I've already done, this is going to be my bottom piece. I'm going to take the top edge. Here, let me show you on this one here. So this is my top piece of the envelope because these overlap. So on the bottom of this, I'm going to take this to my iron, and I'm going to fold this, roughly about 3/4 of an inch to an inch to tuck under. Going to use my seam guide here to check. So that's about 3/4 of an inch of a tuck that I've got here, and I'm going to give this a press. Then what I'm going to do is, once this is pressed, I am going to turn the raw edge in to that press line, fold it back down. So now I have a finished edge here. I don't have raw edges anymore, and I'm going to press this all again to hold this. Then I'm going to put a couple pins in just to hold this in place till I can get this stitch. So I'll be right back once I do that ironing. All right, so I ironed this. Like I said, I pulled it down about 3/4 of an inch, just like this, gave it a press. Then I tucked the raw edges under and gave it another press. And now I'm just putting pins in to secure this. And then we're just going to sew along the whole length, close to the edge here, a seam. And again, I'm using my long stitch length for a top stitch because this shows on the outside. I'm going to lock my stitches in, removing my pins before I sew over them. So you can see I'm sewing very, very close to this edge here, but it doesn't have to be right on the edge. A little bit in is fine. So I'm going to do this across this whole section, pulling the pins out. Going over that seam, it's a little thick. Just go slow on your machine. I'll sew right over that. Oops, sewed over that last one. My bad. Okay, so I locked that in, trimming my threads off. Now you might notice too on this type of material, this is a home decor outdoor fabric material, is what this blue one is. And the center is a cotton home decor fabric. They're thicker and heavier than your regular cottons, but they also frequently tend to unwind a lot like this. the weave just pulls out, and so you have a lot of these loose threads. So remember that if you choose this type of material to sew with, that you'll have a lot of loose threads. Now I could have zigzagged all around the edge of my seams, which I'm going to do once I construct the whole thing together to seal in this unweaving that happens. Anyway, so we'll get to that when we sew that. So now I have my two back pieces. Here's my bottom finished one. I got one edge finished like that because those do not get sewn anymore. This one here will lay on top to overlap, and that's what forms the envelope for the back of the pillow. Now this will measure, I think it's 16¼ inches. I don't quite remember, but it'll match the front panel that we've already done. So this overlap will just determine by when we go to pin it all together. So you can see that I've got them all running in the same direction. That looks much nicer than if I had two pieces coming together like this, where I have words that are upside down to each other like that, and images that are upside down. Sorry, I don't know if you could see that originally, how it comes together where everything is in the right direction. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I've already completed my front panel. Like I said, it is done exactly the same as the back side panel or half panel that I finished, except that your edges you don't need to tuck under. So this is the front one. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to take my top of the back. This is the one I want to go on the top to overlap the other one. So I'm going to take that one, put it down so that the three panels match each other, just like that. Now when I come up here to the edge where I'm going to sew it together, I fold down my material, my top piece, just a little bit, and I make sure that that is lined up exactly where I want it. And I put a pin right through there to hold that. That way I'm sure as I'm sewing around that those seams will match. Again, if you sew it so that they are off kilter from each other, this is what the seam ends up looking like, or potentially could look like. This is an over-exaggeration, but you see how that didn't match up right here. And that doesn't look as nice as if the two sides actually line up as they go from the front to the back. So this is how you ensure that that will happen or be pretty darn close to matching. All right, so now I'm just going to finish pinning this around the edge, and then I'll be back to show you putting on the other back piece as soon as I get this all pinned. All right, so now I've got my top back piece all pinned down the sides and across the top and down the other side. Now I'm going to take my other bottom piece and match up the other end where the three stripes meet. So again, we just do this just like we did with the first piece. Going to match up these sides, the three stripes, so that they join together and align correctly. Put some pins in to hold that. Going to go to my corners, put in a few more pins. Now it's going to overlap on the side. You can see here's my bottom piece, or what becomes the top piece on the back. So this is going to lay on top of that, and I'm just going to adjust those pins so they go through all the layers now on the side. So I'll be back once I get this all pinned. All right, so I have this all pinned now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all around the outer perimeter. Doesn't matter where you start, really. Any place is fine, so I'm just going to start on this side. I'm going to put my stitch length back down to about a 10-12 because this is not a top stitch now. This is actually a structure seam for this project. So again, just going to lock my stitch in and start sewing, removing my pins when I get to them. So I'm going to go all the way around, and I'll show you when we get up to a corner here how to turn a corner. So almost there. Now, because I can't really see those stitch lines, what I have done is I am using my zigzag foot here. The distance between the needle and this outer edge is a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to sew down here as I get towards the end. So I'm actually going to use my seam guide, and I am going to mark a 1/4 inch width so I can see where to stop, and you can actually put a pin in if you want, just right here at the edge to hold that, to tell you that's what you sew up to. Stop with your needle down, pull in that pin. Now I'm raising my presser foot and I am just rotating my fabric around to sew in the direction I want to go. Putting my pressure foot back down and now sewing forward. So that's how you turn a corner. So I'm going to be back once I get all the way around to the other edge where I started. So see you soon. All right, so I'm back around to the side where I started. I'm going to stop with my needle down. If you stop with your needle down, you don't have to worry about jiggling and getting your seam stitches out of line. So I trimmed off those thread ends before I got to it. So here's where I started, right here. So I'm just sewing till I meet that. Back stitching, coming forward, and I am done. I'm going to trim this off now. All right, so the last thing we need to do is zigzag all around this perimeter. That'll help hold these threads that want to become loose and annoying. So on my machine, it's an oldie, I'm just going to put it at a wide zigzag. I am going to leave my stitch length the same, and I am just going to zigzag, there we go, all around this perimeter. You can do this either so that both sides are on your material, or you could have one slightly off and the other end of the zigzag in your material. And that's what I'm trying to do, have one off, one on, kind of like an overcast stitch. So just going to finish this up, and then I'll be back once it's all done. All right, so I sewed all zigzag, all around the perimeter to seal off these raw edges to help with the fraying. And now what we're left to do is pretty much just turn this right side out, put our pillow form in. But before we do that, we have to turn it to the right side out and then push our corners out. Now, if I wasn't doing that zigzag, what I would have done is at these corners, I would have cut off about at a 45-degree angle, because that makes the corner look smoother. But because I zigzagged it, I couldn't do that without undoing all my stitches. So I am just going to poke in one corner, turn this all so it's right side out. So I'm going to take my point turner, put it inside my pillow cover, gently start pushing out the corner here. Even with this blunted edge, you can't go too hard, because on a looser weave fabric like this, it can still poke through. I try to poke it out as much as I can with my finger before I use this. So just gently poking it out. Okay, going to do that in all four corners. And then we're ready to put our pillow form in and your center striped pillow cover for a 16-inch pillow form with an envelope back will be completed. So got one more corner here, and then we'll stuff in our side, and you will see. And I see one thing I did wrong. I don't know if you picked up on it yet, but I sewed this one panel here with the wrong side, using it as my good side, so it doesn't quite match. It's the back, so I'm not too worried about that. It does match in color, it just doesn't match in the texture. So this is what it looks like once it's all completed. Now I would go to my iron next, and I'm going to iron this so that it lays flat. So I'll be right back. All right, so I've got this all nice and pressed now. I say if you look here at the top, you can see how the two, front and back, how this matched up, I mean, pretty much perfect. So that's what doing that when you pin around the outside helps. So this is all ironed. So I'm now going to turn this over to the back side. I'm going to flip the top part back around so that it is the wrong side out. Just makes it easier to get your pillow form in, at least I think it does. So I am now going to, in the pocket, tuck in my pillow form. This is a little snug fit. I think it gives a nicer look when it is just a little bit smaller once it's completed than the 16-inch square for the pillow form. Again, just my preference and how I like to do them. Make sure you get your corners poked in of the pillow form. Now I'm going to come back up here to the top where I folded it, and I'm going to push it all so that it is right side out, just like that. Again, I'm going to make sure that I tuck into these corners here, the pillow form. Okay. So now this is where the two sides meet for the envelope on the back. Once again, you can see that all the writing goes in the correct direction. Everything matches. On the front side, we have the center stripe with the two side pieces. So this would be the front of your pillow form, of your pillow cover. And that is it. You are done. That's how simple it is. Everything is a straight stitch line. If you can do a mask, you can definitely make this pillow cover pattern. I'm available to help today with this video on Cricut Design Space. Actually, if you find this at other times, I can, if you tag me in, or actually I think if you post a question on this or a comment, I'll see it. And you can also find me at the Sister Fabric Fun with Cricut Design Space group that we'd love to have you as a member of. Have all sorts of fun projects that we do over there that are created using fabric and your Cricut Maker or Explorer. We do predominantly sewing, but we also put up non-sew projects too all the time. Hope to see you over there. Thank you.